Hello and welcome to Green Hill Garage. In today's video, we're going to be working on our dad's 1951 TO-30. This tractor, we had it for quite a while actually. My dad's owned it I think since around 93 or 94. And this tractor was originally rebuilt by a good friend of ours. It's been a good little tractor, but the clutch started slipping on it recently, especially when we were brush hogging. So we're going to get to work on it. It's got some other things that we're going to do to it. We're going to put on a pressure gauge, or not, an oil pressure gauge, a water temp sensor, which is really critical. We've been brush hogging a lot with it, and the temperatures do go up, especially in the summer, so having a temperature gauge is really critical. So we're going to put a new one of those, and then an amperage gauge. But the big repair today is going to be the clutch. So in order to do this, we're going to be splitting the tractor. We're going to start with taking the fuel tank off, this exhaust off. I already took the battery off and the hood off. Now the battery was really easy, just half-inch nuts on that, and then 5/8 inch right down here. Yeah, just 5/8 right there, and then another 5/8 right down here on the other side. This radiator held together really nice. It needs cleaned, as you can see. It's pretty dirty. It's got lots of chaff in it, but that just comes from working. So we'll get started on this, guys, and we'll see if we can get the tractor split. So the first step to pulling this tractor in half is, as I said before, pull the hood and whatnot. But we're going to start by, we drain the oil. You're going to want to do that because the rear main seal is connected right in here. We're going to start with pulling this cable here from the solenoid to the starter. That cable will go there, then this cable off of the key switch. And we're going to want to label them because there's not a really specific order, but we're going to want those. Oh, there's the cat. So we're going to pull them, and then the starter is going to come off because we don't want that engaging with the ring gear. I'm not 100% certain how this flywheel goes. The flywheel should stay with the engine, so there shouldn't be an issue with the starter. But we're going to probably take it off just because it's only 2 bolts. And then it's just a series of bolts on the other side. But before we pull those other bolts, we're going to pull this air intake. Just comes off here. I'm not sure. I guess you just pull on the top side. There's a set of bolts in here. It looks like a pair of 5/8 hold this oil bath filter together. Then just some screws to the carburetor. So the exhaust is going to come off. This choke rod looks like that already fell off. Then it's just a process of getting these bolts knocked loose. What we're going to do is we're going to block up this rear end. We've got our cherry picker, and we're going to come in. We're going to block up this front end so that there's not as much tilt side to side, because if we just let it go, it could just slosh to either side quite a ways. So we're going to block it up in there, and then we'll be able to just pick it up from the rear. I haven't decided a lift point, but I think we can get behind it a chain right back in here. So I believe that's going to be our lift point, and that should work nicely. Look at you. It's been around, I'd say, about 15 degrees at night. It's been fairly, I guess, kind of warm comparatively. We've had some storms moving through, so the cloud cover keeps warm. But the cat, she's been wanting something a lot warmer than that. So guys, we'll get started. We'll pull the exhaust and all the things that I just mentioned, and we'll see you then. Okay guys, so we got most of this tractor stripped down. The last thing that we need to do is just pull off this alternator cord, and then we're pretty well done. The one hardest part that we had is getting this old linkage off. This throttle linkage has never really worked right, so I'm going to see if I can't design or come up with something a little different, because the issue that we've always had is that it won't hold full throttle and then it won't stay at idle. and it's just because the linkage has so much play in it. It's all worn out. We had tried before using wire to try to make it stiff, but that didn't work. So at this point, we're just going to try to find something else. The good news is our carburetor is just your run-of-the-mill butterfly opening carburetor, so we can probably come up with something. So that'll call it for the night. We'll pick up back in the morning, and we'll keep tearing down on it. So the next step is going to be to pull off the steering bars. We got one on top, and then the other is just a stabilizer bar for the axle. We've got to get both of them pulled because they're the only thing left other than the bolts on the flywheel housing that's holding this tractor together. So it's just one nut there, another long bolt there, or maybe it's two. Let's see. I think it really is a nut and two bolts. So we'll get those bolts pulled, and we'll be able to pull off the two sidebars, and we're ready to pull the flywheel bolts. So now, guys, we got the tie rod off. What I ended up doing is these were all seized on here, and I could not get them off for the life of me. So instead of fighting with them, I just went ahead, unbolted it right here. It's just the keyway, so the key held on just fine, and you really can't get it wrong because there's only one notch. So mine just went ahead, lifted that off, then bolted this, so this will be clear to roll away. I was looking at trying to pull this, but then I thought, that'd be such a pain in the butt. So we're getting ready now. We did that on both sides. So now we've got our cherry picker here, and we're going to be chaining it down and around this side, through here and into there. First, what we got to start with is pulling this inspection plate. This plate is what's guarding the clutch. We'll pull that, and then we'll start working our way up and around on these bolts. But we're going to do it on both sides, pull evenly. Then we're going to, once we get the bottom bolts in, we can get the chain on, and then that'll support this thing. We're also going to get our 20-ton bottle jack under this rear end, support that. So we'll get our jack stand set up, our 20-ton bottle, and we'll start pulling those bolts off. So now, guys, we got the bolts all undone except for our top three. What we did was we ran our 20-ton bottle under here, and we had to lift this up like maybe a ½ inch to get that jack stand clear. We also got wood in here. I want to be super safe. The brakes are locked on this. We're also going to chalk these rear wheels up. That way this rear end doesn't go anywhere. Then what we're going to do, we got our chain wrapped around here, and we're going to pull these three bolts. And the way this is sitting, it wants to tilt out. There's not a lot of weight on the front right now because of our jack stand in the middle. But once we start unscrewing those bolts, the front end's going to slowly start to come down. Now what I did is I put a set of chocks in here. It's blocked in really well on both sides so that this engine can't tip that much on the front axle. We don't have any tie rod holding our front wheels, so they may kind of flop around a little, but we have a cherry picker, so we can make it work. So now we're going to pull those three bolts, and we'll see if we can get to roll away from it. So now, guys, we're going to go ahead and take this. We pulled the top bolt off, and I didn't realize that that was straight into a water jacket, so we had to go and drain our coolant out. Of course, still managed to make a mess, but that's what cat litter's for. So now we just got two bolts. We got one right there behind the chain, and one right over there. We're going to slowly loosen them at the same time and get this tractor to split. So we'll slowly loosen them and see if it pulls apart. Alright, so we're filming in real time now. Let's get our 11/16. I think it's up there on the workbench. We'll grab that. Where's the bar that holds the cherry picker out? Did you lose that? No. It's right down the workbench. Just don't knock the phone on. Oh. That's a terrible place to put a time of emergency. Where's the bar? Alright, so yeah, split. Trackage now starting to slowly split. Yep. Now this side. Should we put a little more tension on to hold the engine? Well, hold on, because we're gonna need our 11/16 inch socket here on an extension to be able to reach that. Get my socket in behind. I guess the last bolt we actually have to pull is this what? This guy. We never pulled him. Alternator. Oh, yeah. I don't know if that will fit though off of there. We'll grab me a 5/16 inch wrench. Okay, now I got that last battery case, that cable out of there. There we go. Alright, now I'll start loosening this bolt. Slip it. Just stand on the picker. Shouldn't be a problem yet. Okay. Now it's coming out. Problem we have is our stupid chains in the way. I think what we can do, we have any wood block? Oh man, this one. I'll do 2x4 ideally. Or the outside. Yeah. So the issue I'm having, guys, is my final bolt here is pinned behind my chain. So yeah, that's been messing with me. So as you can see, it's starting to separate. We're gonna take that chain there, space it out with a piece of wood. That should give me enough room to get a socket on it. And then once we have that socket, we can start loosening that side and loosening this side. So I'll go ahead, guys, set you back down, and we'll get back to work. Start to. All right, now we're ready. So bring the chain down a little bit. Alright, now slowly come up with it. Stop. Out. Yeah. No, can't draw right there. Yeah, but that bolt just fell down. So lower the chain slowly. There we go. Alright. Now slowly come up with it. Stop. Now, come around this other side. Straighten our wheel there. Sure this thing isn't going to fall forward? No. You're not sure? It's not going to go forward. The weight's all set on the back. Can you lift up a little more and do some tension? No. Super right there. Okay. So you're going to come up just a little. Slowly come down. Now come up again, just pump. So now you're going to start backing out with your. Oh, hold on, let me come around the other side. Tires. track. Alright, there we go. Now we just need some wood or something for it to sit on. Well, yeah, we're gonna want to block that up, so go get a thick block. Alrighty guys, we got it split. There it is. Just a clutch there, and then our housing here. Everything looks good from what I can just tell just by looking. I don't see anything obviously broken, but I do see a lot of oil, and I think that's because we have a failed rear main seal. That's just my guess at this moment. Well, that's the only thing I can see that would be that much oil in there. So we're gonna get this thing blocked up and call it for the evening. It's been a hard day, long day, but we're gonna get that big old block under it and call it. So we'll catch up with you guys in the morning when we get ready to replace the clutch. So guys, it's the next day. We're starting. We're gonna go ahead and pull off the clutch. It'll begin by pulling off this pressure plate. We've got 6 half-inch bolts, really easy. What we're gonna want to do is loosen them all about the same. What you can actually start by doing is just pulling 3 off and then loosen the last 3 on their own, because this is under pressure from these springs here. We'll be able to pull that, then just allow that pressure plate to come off. Well, hello, dirty cat. Ooh. What is the next step? So then after that, once we pull this clutch disc, we can take a look at that rear main seal. But I think that rear main seal is why we have all this oil in here. It looks like there's kind of a buildup, and I think that's what originally led to the clutch slipping. So we're going to want to get that addressed. We don't need any more leaking. And as you can see, there's like oil that's splattered out, so I believe the rear main seal is to blame for that. So I ordered a new one from Steiner. Highly recommend Steiner for tractor parts. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but they're just a really good company to use. So I'll go ahead and pull those nuts, guys, and we'll get this clutch plate off. Okay, guys, we got the clutch off. So what I can tell is that this is just soaked in oil. This rubber clutch material, it's just completely soaked, oil impregnated, and yeah, this was why it was slipping. When we go ahead and lift this clutch off, the disc doesn't even show anything like burn spots or anything. Basically the oil was just causing it to slip. Another thing I noticed is there's play. Let's see if I can get that. I'm not sure if you guys can tell. Maybe you guys can hear it. There you go. But this clutch plate was hot. It got hot and it got loose. So this clutch plate is pretty well toast. So we have our brand new one here from Steiner. This one I noticed even has a set of springs in it. I'm not sure if that's some kind of shock absorption or load absorption. I'm not 100% certain how this particular clutch works compared to the stock one. But it's got brand new. And what I also noticed is the grooves on the teeth are more spaced in than this one. This has wider pads, so maybe this is meant to have a little more cooling. So what I'm going to do to prep this, I think I'm just going to take a piece of sandpaper and just rub it down good, and then hit it with some brake clean. Same story with our flywheel here. This one does show heat marks, so I think this was the primary side where it slipped. Especially brush hogging was where I noticed there was to really start slipping. I think it wasn't slipping on the pressure plate side, it was only slipping on the flywheel side. So that's something to keep in mind. And we have I think that's our throwout bearing there. We'll have to check that because that feels a little sticky. So we'll check our throwout bearing, or no, sorry, pilot bearing. We'll check our pilot bearing there. Throwout bearing, I ordered a new one of those because when I felt it, it was just a little loose. Had some play to it and I didn't really care for that. So I ordered a new one of those along with the new rear main seal. We're waiting on that. But we're also going to be cleaning out that inside. This motor, I got to talk with my dad. This motor was a brand new motor back in '93, I believe. And so what the story was, a good friend of my dad's bought this tractor and the engine had a cracked block. And these TO-30s, they tend to crack right in between the cylinders. So if you have your cylinder here and your cylinder here, it's that little spot right in between the two cylinders. It cracked on each one right down the center. So he had gone ahead and he just bought a brand new engine for it. So this is a brand new motor as far as 93. My dad hasn't used this tractor very hard, so we're estimating probably somewhere around 700 to 800 hours tops on this motor. So it's a really good motor. It makes lots of power. The biggest downside we've had with this TO-30 is the Zenith carburetor. Now my dad back in 94, 95, he owned a little property up in the mountains, kind of, probably about 50 miles from here. And what the deal was with that was he was trying to pull a plow, I think is what he said, a one bottom plow. And this thing would just keep dying on him. And he thought it was a carburetor. Now this was originally equipped when a friend of ours got this tractor to Dad. Dad bought it from him and it had a Marvel Shebler carburetor. And Marvel Shebler, Dad thought that was the issue. What the real issue was this fuel tank over here. Actually has an auxiliary tank on the stock tractor. And Dad didn't know that. But what had happened was it broke off inside of the tank. And it was floating around and it would land over the sediment bowl and plug off the sediment bowl. And then, of course, if you shook the tractor enough, it would come off of the tractor's piece right there for the sediment bowl. And then you get fuel again. And Dad could never figure it out, so he thought it was a carburetor at first, so he replaced it. And he's managed to lose a carburetor. We're still on the hunt for it, but he knows he didn't throw it away. But typical thing, you wait 20, 30 years, and pretty soon it gets really hard to find things. What he ended up doing was he took it down to a guy. The guy cut open this tank here, pulled out that auxiliary tank, and then welded it closed. So this tank has been a perfectly good tank ever since then. No issues there. Hello, dirty cat. Yeah, the old barn cat's. She's not been too happy with the temperatures lately. We got down to, I think, 5 degrees last night. Today's supposed to get real warm, though. I think sometime we're around 40. So that'd be nice. So, yeah, guys, I'll just get this sanded down. We'll get ready to mount that new plate. But before we do that, we're actually going to pull this flywheel here and get to that rear main seal because I believe that's our primary cause of leakage. So we're going to wait for our rear main seal. Once it gets here, we'll start the rest of the project. Now the next step in the build is to take this flywheel off. And what we're going to do is we're going to take those 4 bolts off, which I already have. And we're just going to go ahead and lift up on our stand here. Or cherry picker, I should say. It's not really a stand. Until our flywheel is no longer touching. And then we should be able to just wiggle this loose. Let me grab my gloves over here. Oh boy, so that's kind of tight. So I'll see what it takes to get it off. But I think it should just pop right off. Okay, so I got it popped loose. It's a little bit stuck on with the on the threads, so I just kind of loosened it up with our crowbar. And there we go. Flywheel is popped off. So it's only held on by 4 bolts, or 4 nuts I should say. These 4 nuts weren't on there all that tight, to be honest. So I'm not certain what the deal was with that. Let's see. Man, running out of bench press. That happens. Okay. Ooh. And this flywheel is heavy, guys. Be aware of that when you go pull it off. Okay, so as you can see, we've got all these burn marks here. Let's see if I can get you a clear picture. There you go. It looks like it is a little bit heat cracked. And I don't see anything that's going to warrant it completely needing replaced, so that's just a hair. So we'll go ahead, we'll sand this thing down a little bit with just a soft sanding block and touch this all up. Doesn't look like it's warped. I'll measure it to see if it is warped, but I doubt it is. It doesn't look like it got that hot. So I'll get to work on that, guys, and we'll get ready to replace the rear main seal. Now, as you guys can see, the rear main seal was indeed the culprit. It looks like it's been just steadily dripping out of there. That's all it would take for it to just drip down. Well, first it would catch on this little piece here on the hub, and then it would just spin outward along the flywheel. And then, of course, once it got up here onto the outer casing, it would drip down onto the clutch. Of course, it took 700 engine hours to do that, so it was a little bit before it fully did that. But as you can see, that's what rear main seal leak will do over time. So, yep, that was the cause. We're gonna go ahead, pull off this retainer, and get ready to replace the main seal. Okay, guys, so I got those 5 bolts. Well, it's actually 3 bolts and 2 nuts popped loose, and so then we can just slide this back, and there we go. We have our rear main seal pulled. As you can see, there's oil holes there. It's all part of this bearing here. This crankshaft holds on the rear bearing. I also cleaned out this inside here, so we got that all wiped down. Got anything that could drip, got that all wiped out. So that looks a lot better. So our Steiner order arrived yesterday. It's about 2 or 3 days after our last clip. So it came with a new throwout bearing. So I was looking at that bearing, and it, as I showed you guys, it's just a little loose, and I don't really like that. It wasn't chattering or squealing, but I don't want to put an old bearing in. So we got our new bearing and our new seal. So we'll get this old seal out and get ready to put the new one in. All right, guys, we got the new crankshaft lip seal in. I don't know if you can tell, but it's brand new. It feels much tighter. I think the old one just kind of wore out from time. There's a little spring that goes all the way around, forces the lip seal down, and it felt like that spring either snapped or just come loose. So the next thing, I went ahead and pulled our clutch throwout bearing here. And in order to do that, you just pull one spring there and one spring there. It's really simple. And then the carrier bearing, or the carrier, just sits right here. And now we've got our old bearing. And as you can see, it's still got all sorts of free play. There you go. So we got our new bearing here from Steiner. What we got to do, we got to either press this out. We may be able to heat it. So I'm going to see what it needs to do. But basically, this piece on the carrier is going to come out off the throwout bearing. And then we'll just press on the new throwout bearing. So I'll see what it takes to get this one off, and I'll get right back to you. So guys, it wasn't all that hard. Basically, this unit was just sitting like this with this bearing. Went ahead and hammered on it, and it literally just a few taps and it came right out. So not hard at all. We're going to take our new bearing now and press it on. All right, guys, we got our new bearing and carrier in. They look like $1 million in there. We've got, so each spring just goes and connects back there. There's one spring on each side to that carrier. Carrier just slips on, and then when the clutch is pressed, just pushes the throwout bearing in. So I greased this up, wiped out the old grease, put fresh grease on the inside of this carrier and on these 2 pads here, so this thing will stay nice and lubed, won't wear out the carrier. We've got our new seal in there. So now we're ready to get our flywheel and new clutch in. So we'll head over here. I've got my flywheel, my clutch, and my pressure plate all on this shelf. So I'll grab that flywheel there, and we'll get that bolted on. Alrighty, guys, we got the flywheel on. Sorry about that. Oh man. So we got these little nuts torqued down to 55 foot-pounds. And the story with them is they're actually studs, but it looks like one of them was screwed out a little farther than the others. And I can't figure out why, but I spun this whole thing over once, and it's all true. So we're flat up against the crankshaft. So now we're going to put in our new clutch here. We got this friction disc here from Steiner. We also got their little clutch tool. So basically all you do, you just slide it in and let that ride in like that. Then we'll take our pressure plate over there and we'll put that up against it. We'll be able to bolt it on. I'm going to need 2 hands for this, so I'll set you down, guys, and I'll put that pressure plate on. Alrighty guys, we got the clutch and everything in. Really sad part, I ended up putting all the flywheel on and then realized I'd left the main seal retaining plate nuts off. So had to pull everything off. It wasn't too bad though. Better to figure that out now than put the whole tractor together and have a massive oil leak. So got that put on. So now the clutch is in. We got this all cleaned up and the tractor's ready to go together. So we'll call it for the night, and then we'll pick up in the morning and put the tractor back together.
3, 2, 1, go.
Alrighty guys, it's 2 days from our last clip. We're gonna take this tractor and zip it back together. Now we got our new throwout bearing, we got our new clutch, we got that all bolted down in the last section. It's really cold. Last night it got down to about 3 degrees. Cat's, of course, not too happy about that. But we have a fire going, so shop's not near as brutal as it would normally be. As you can see, we spent most of yesterday organizing. It's still not all that great over there in our parts corner, but it's a lot better than it was. Our lives really need some organization, so glad that that finally happened. So we're gonna get started. We'll pull that chalk out of there and we'll start wheeling this sucker back. Something to keep in mind, we're gonna have to, once we get far enough back, we're gonna have to lift these up and hold them on because they are still connected right here and we do not have any play forward and back with them. So just something to keep in mind. So we'll get started. We'll put you guys on hyperlapse and me and Trey are gonna push this thing together. So we got it all put together. We have there's a series of long bolts, and we put our long bolts all the way around. This one we put a little silicone on. This one goes directly into the water jacket, so you'll want to be sure to seal that one up. And then we got them all torqued down, so everything's good there. The only thing we have left is our clutch cover, which is going to be down right under here. It's just a series of small bolts and then the steel plate. And then we'll be done as far as tightening this thing all up on the frame. Now the next step is going to be to take these steering arms or stabilizer arms and run a bolt into them. We're going to run one here and one there. We'll start with this one just because it's already lined up, and then once we get that pinned in, we can roll that side out, get that pinned in, and then we'll be ready for our actual steering arms. Steering arms are going to come out here at this knuckle, and then we'll be able to get that pinned on. The good news is there's only one position these can be in because there's only one key. They're not one of those with like a spline. The splined ones I've worked on, they're really hard to get perfectly straight, especially when it's really fine teeth. So that's always a pain in the butt. But this one doesn't have splines. This one just has a woodruff key, so it's going to be super easy. So we'll get these pins in, guys, and we'll get ready to put those steering arms on. So now, guys, what we're going to do, we're going to take our, we got our pins connected. So now we're going to connect our steering shafts. Now to do this, you see we have a woodruff key right here, and we have a slot for right here, woodruff key slot. So on the other side, we already got it lined up on the other side, and what you got to keep in mind is this steering box is non-infinite. So there's a very good chance if you pulled this apart that the steering box, it came apart in there. So picture each arm sticks out like this. So when you have one come out this way, you want them to both be out, and then spin the wheel when you don't feel like they, let them just touch, and then spin the wheel until they're both even. Then that way you'll have enough travel on both sides, so when you're turning, you don't hit the end of the turn and then come off the cog. So that was something to keep in mind. We're going to take this shaft now, Let's see if we can line it up. Looks like we need to turn it, the wheel just a touch. Sometimes it helps if you just clean it off a little. So that looks about straight there. So I'm just gonna tap it until we see that our bolt hole is clear. There's a little notch cut into this shaft, and so you want to have that notch be perfectly clear, otherwise the bolt won't go in. So now I'm gonna take our bolt, and all these bolts on the TO-30 are fine threads, unless they were a replacement. We'll do that, and then just dust off that a little so that the bolt will go on easier. And we'll just put our lock washer on and nut on. Gotta check sometimes we're going the right way. And it's an 11/16, so most of the times these will hold just with friction, so you don't need 2 wrenches. You'll just torque it down, usually about tight. A lot of this stuff you don't really need a torque wrench, so there we go. So now, to be sure we can turn in all directions, take our wheel, turn it all the way to the left. As you can see, we didn't come off our cog, turning to the left. Turn all the way to the right. We didn't come off our cog to the right. So that means our shaft is good. We got them lined up properly. So there you go. Got those lined up. Now, if you look at this, the one thing we do notice is that our wheel is actually a little bit off here. And I think that's because this is actually a cog off on that box. So what we're going to need to do, slip this right side off and then reline it. So you may need to do that. This wheel's straight, that one's not quite, so obviously we were a tooth off. So we'll get that straightened out, guys, and we'll be right back. Alrighty guys, we got this glued. Had to wait overnight. I took this cast iron part into the house, but it's got nice solid JB weld. We let it sit, well, since yesterday and then overnight. So it's had plenty of time to cure. We're gonna go ahead and get some pipe sealer, mount in that thermostat, and then of course our radiator has room to flex. So it'll fit on our hose. Everything's bolted down. I put a new gasket right here at this housing. So we're just about done, guys. End is in horizon, or in view on the horizon. So now we'll get to work here. We're gonna get our gauge tied in. Looks like we got plenty of room for that clamp, so that'll be good. We got our other 2 gauges tied in. We got our oil pressure gauge right there, and our amp meter. Now this tractor has suffered from for years is a throttle where it just takes off and runs, and you can't really control it. And we never could figure out the linkage. As we showed earlier, that linkage is just toast. So I've converted it to cable. Now the way I did that, it's kind of a hobo setup to begin with, but we need something for mock-up. So this cable is mocked up to where it comes right out of here, and the cable is just pinned right there, so that controls that. And then up here I made a little bracket for mock-up, and that little bracket's gonna clip into our throttle. So pulling it out is gonna be idle, so that it still follows the original path of throttle. Pulling it out, it's going to be idle. Pulling it down, it's going to push that cable in and have it be full throttle. So as you can see, this is full throttle, this is idle. So pulling it in is idle, pushing it out is full throttle. So we're going to need clearly a set of springs to provide tension. So the way that's going to work, we have this piece of wire here. We'll run a fairly soft spring. I tried a throttle spring I had off an old Ford pickup, but it was a little too harsh of a throttle spring. So we'll get a lighter spring And what that's going to do is just provide some tension on this side. We'll get one on here and then one up here. And with 2 springs keeping tension on this, then that way the cable will, no matter where you pull this, the cable will still stay tight and it'll keep that throttle turning where we want it to. So that's where we are now. I'll get ready. We'll put this hose on and get the thermostat in. So now guys, we're just getting the fuel tank on. We got that little water temp sensor in there, all nicely bolted in. We got the hose back on, ran it back over here. I had to do something with the slack, so right now it's just zip tied, which that'll probably work. And then we've got our gauge mounted here. Nice looking gauge, really came out good. I'm really liking this set from Steiner. And we're just about done with wiring. We got our fuel tank plumbed into the carburetor. When you're doing these, I've done this on accident a couple times, where if you just set fuel on, the fuel tank's higher than the entire engine. So if you're not careful, this will flood and it'll fill up with gasoline and go right into the cylinders and then down into your oil, completely ruin your oil. So what you want to do when you first turn on fuel, pull this hose here and just tap on that carburetor with something. Just keep an eye, give it about 30-40 seconds, and if you don't see anything, you're probably good. It means the float closed. But won't always do that because those floats get stuck and this will just flood out and fill up into the engine. So something to keep in mind. We've still got to put some springs on our throttle, but it's all adjusted. So this would be full throttle, this is idle. I just need some light springs now to keep tension on that cable. Because I get the feeling that with engine vacuum, it's going to try to pull this thing open. So, but we're getting close, guys. Just got to tighten down that line. I just saw a drip there. May need to get some fuel. I have some fuel tape, so we may throw that on the threads. But yeah, we just drained out the oil filter housing, and we're going to put fresh oil in this tractor, and we're darn close, guys. We're going to mount the hood on next after we get the exhaust in. Our exhaust, we got to figure out. It was a little wobbly. It has been just sitting here with this bracket. And there's a bolt that we've been running through back there. I think that'll work for now. The biggest improvement we made to our exhaust was when we took our old muffler, it had been wobbling for a while, and we put some tack welds on it. They're not the greatest, but they keep it from wobbling. So that was all that needed to do. So this setup, we put this pipe on. We kept having our neighbor actually got a fire going from his tractor. He used to have one of those pipes that was slung under the tractor. When you're going over a windrow hay raking like we do, that exhaust, the hot exhaust, just sitting right down there. So didn't really care for that. So we rerouted it. It comes in an elbow up and out, which isn't the greatest for carburetor adjustments, I will say that, but it's better than having potential fire or anything like that. So we'll get this hood on, guys. We'll get that fuel line fixed, and we're about ready to fire it up. Go. Alrighty, guys, we got all together. We got our connections to our battery on. I didn't see anything light on fire, so fingers crossed it should fire up. We got our fuel tank connected. We just put in fresh oil, some 5W30 mixed with a little 1540 because we got summer coming up. So it gets hot enough out here in the 1540 if it's blended, it'll work. So, and also because we ran out of 5W30. So we'll see if this thing fires up. We may need to do a little check. It's easier said than done. Oh, yeah, 15. Oil pressure's still coming out. Alright guys, it worked. The final step is to add coolant, and we're ready to put the hood on. So we'll see you then. So now, guys, I'm really sorry about the wind, but got a storm moving in. The tractor runs nice. As you can see, we ran it. We got no leaks. Oil pressure lights on. Clutch engage, or sorry, not oil pressure light, but oil pressure gauge shows up. We've got charging. Still haven't come up to temperature, but we'll keep an eye on that. It all worked nicely, guys. Really worked quite well. I just tried out the clutch. The clutch is solid. Everything's going into gear nicely. So really happy with it. So we're gonna call it for today, guys. Thank you all for watching. Remember to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to Green Hill Garage. We're gonna have videos of our little trencher. It's kind of a sneak peek. We've got videos of that. We've got more videos of the Kawasaki Mule, and the 660 Raptor will be next. So thank you all for watching. You all have a great day.